Hello, everybody. Welcome to the story time at the Milledgeville Public Library in Illinois. The story we have for today comes from Russia, and it is the story of a very clever princess and a very clever prince. This is the story of the Frog Princess. Once long ago, there was a Tsar in Russia. That would be the king, basically. And he had 3 sons that were very strong and very handsome. And when his 3 sons were grown up and the right age to think about getting married, the Tsar said to them, "What I want you to do, my sons, I want you to each take your bow and 1 arrow. And I want you to go outside the palace walls to the great field where no one is allowed to hunt. And I want to take that bow and I want you to fire your arrow as far as you possibly can. And whoever picks up your arrow shall be your bride." And so the 3 sons went, they took their bows and 1 arrow each, and they went out to the field and they shot their arrows. And the first son, he shot his arrow and it went quite far. And it landed in the courtyard of a nobleman's house, and it was picked up by his daughter. And so the first son was to marry the nobleman's daughter. Well, the second son went out and he shot his arrow very far. And it landed just outside of the house of a general. And the general's daughter saw it, and she went and she picked it up, so she was to become the bride of the second son. Well, the Tsar's youngest son, his name was Ivan. And Ivan went out and he shot his arrow so far that no one saw where it landed. And he had to go searching for it. And it took him 2 days. At the end of 2 days, as he was searching through a swampland, he finally found his arrow in the mouth of a frog. And he went over to retrieve the arrow from the frog. And much to his surprise, the frog said, "Prince Ivan, if you would like your arrow back, you must take me as your bride." Well, Ivan was quite surprised by that, but, well, his father had said that whoever picked up the arrow would have to be the bride, but this was a frog. But it was a frog who could talk, so there must be some magic here. Well, Ivan was not quite sure what to do. So he took his arrow from the frog, and he took the little frog, and he placed her in his pocket, and he went back to the palace. And he went to his father, and he said, "Father, what do I do?" And his father said, "Ivan, you must marry the frog. You promised." And the very next day, the weddings took place. The eldest prince married the daughter of the nobleman. The second prince married the daughter of the general. And Ivan, he married the little frog. His brothers laughed at him, and their wives laughed at him, for he showed up at the palace in a closed carriage so no one could see him coming. And he carried his little bride, his frog bride, in on a golden plate, for although he was a bit ashamed and very, very not sure what to do with all of this, he made sure to treat the little frog with kindness, as he would treat anyone. Well, after the princes and their brides had been married for a little while, the Tsar summoned his sons to him. And he said, "My sons, I should like to find out how skilled your wives are. Go to my storehouses and take some linen, and take that linen back to your brides, and have them make me a shirt. And tomorrow morning, you must bring me the shirts that they have made for me." Now, if you've never tried to make a shirt, it's not terribly difficult, but it's not easy to do in just 1 day and 1 night. So the princes went and they took the linen from the storehouses and they went home with it. Well, the 2 oldest princes' brides, well, they knew they were good at sewing, so they thought they could make perfectly good shirts in 1 day and 1 night. But they laughed to themselves as they worked together on making their shirts, thinking, oh my goodness, what is the little frog going to do? She doesn't have fingers to work a needle and thread. She'll never be able to do it. Well, Prince Ivan, he went home, and he was sort of sad and sort of not happy. The little frog looked at him and she said, "Quack, quack. My love, what is wrong?" And he said, "Well, you see this linen I brought home? Well, my father has ordered that you make him a shirt by tomorrow morning. And I know you can't do it. You don't have fingers to work the needle and to cut out the fabric. And I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't even ask you. You can't do it." And the little frog looked at him and she said, "Ivan, go to sleep. Have a little bit of a rest, for the morning brings more wisdom than the evening." And so Ivan, all right, and he went off to bed. Well, as soon as Prince Ivan was asleep, the little frog stepped out of her frog skin, for you see, she was not really a frog, but a beautiful princess named Vasilisa the Wise. And Vasilisa went to the window, and she took the linen and she threw it out onto the wind, and she said, "Come, my maidens, I must have a shirt such as my father would wear to the most grand occasions by morning." And before morning came, her maidens came flying back to her on the wind, and they brought her a beautiful shirt that was wonderfully made and covered in gold and silver embroidery. It was the most beautiful shirt ever. And Vasilisa very carefully folded it up, and she placed it on the bed on the table next to the sleeping Prince Ivan, and she stepped back into her frog skin. Well, when Prince Ivan woke up the next morning, he found the beautiful shirt there. And so he very carefully wrapped it up, and he took it with him, and he went to the palace. Well, when he arrived at the palace, his father was already looking at the gifts from his older brother's wives. And he opened the package from the first wife, the nobleman's daughter, and he said, this shirt is not even fit for a peasant. It's falling apart already. This is no good." And he tossed it aside. And he opened the package from the second wife, the general's daughter, and he said, "Well, it's not falling apart, but it's not something I'd want to wear. I might wear this to the bath from time to time, but that's really no good. Ivan, what have you got for me?" And so Prince Ivan brought forth the package. And the Tsar opened up the package and he said, "Oh, now this is a beautiful shirt. I will wear this shirt to the grandest occasions." And so Prince Ivan was happy, for his wife had done quite well. And all of the princes went home. And about a week later, the Tsar summoned his sons to him again. And he said, "My sons, I should like to see how accomplished your wives are in the kitchens. So go to the storehouses and take all the flour and the sugar and whatever else you need. And I want each of your wives to make me a cake by morning." All right. So the sons went to the storehouses and they got the flour and the sugar and the milk and everything else that was needed to make a cake. And they took them home to their wives. Now, the two older wives, they had heard about the shirts and how well Vasilisa the Wise had done making that beautiful shirt covered in gold and silver embroidery. And they decided that perhaps she might not be a frog after all, but perhaps she was some kind of a witch or something. And they decided that they were going to send one of their maidservants to spy on her and find out how she was going to make her cake, for they did not want to be outdone again. Well, the maidservant came to the house of Ivan and Vasilisa, and she waited outside until they fell asleep. And of course, Ivan came home with all of the ingredients, and he said, I'm sorry, Father wants you to make a cake. And I know that's hard for you, and I know it's not something you probably can do, but he wants you to make him a cake." And Vasilisa said, "Now, Ivan, It's all right. I can do this. Go to sleep and have a little bit of a rest, for the morning brings more wisdom than the evening. And so Ivan went to sleep, and Vasilisa, well, she figured that those two older sisters would probably, the other brides, they would probably try to figure out what she was going to do. So she stayed in her frog skin, and she mixed up some batter, and she mixed it up, and then she took that batter and she threw it right into the fire on top of some hot flat stones. Well, the maid, she was taking notes of all of the things that she put in the cake, and then she saw her throw it into the fire, right into the hot part of the fire, onto some hot flat stones. And she wrote that down really quickly, and then she ran home to tell her mistress and to share with the other two brides. Well, as soon as the maidservant was gone, Vasilisa very quickly pulled that dough out of the fire, and she got out of her frog skin, and she went to the window, and she called, "Come, my maidens, come! I must have a cake, such as my father would have for the grandest occasions, before the morning." And sure enough, before the morning, the maidens came flying back to her, bringing a beautiful cake. Now, when you think of a cake, at least here in the United States, we think of kind of a flat cake, right? This was not like that. No. No, you see, this was shaped and molded in such a way that it looked like a little city. It had towers and turrets and walls and doorways. Not that the doorways opened, of course not. No. They were full of cake. But it looked like a giant city and a big castle, and it was the most beautiful cake. Well, Vasilisa, she took that cake and she put it on the table next to the sleeping Prince Ivan, and she got back into her frog skin. And the next morning, when Prince Ivan woke up, he found that beautiful cake, and he very carefully covered it up so that he could take it to the palace without damaging it. And when he got to the palace with it, his brothers were already there with their wives' cakes. Now, their wives had done exactly what the maidservant had told them to do. They had put all of the ingredients in, and then they mixed them up, and then they took that dough and they threw it into the fire onto the hottest, flattest stones in the middle of the fire. As a result, their cakes were hard and lumpy and dark and didn't look very tasty. So the Tsar took the first cake. It was a bit heavy, didn't really look good, but he was going to try it anyway, and so he took a bite out of it, and he broke a tooth. He said, "I'm not going to eat this. I just broke my tooth," and he threw it on the floor. Well, then he took the second cake. Well, the second cake was so dark and so heavy and so hard that he simply said, "This isn't even good enough for my dogs," and he threw that one away too. And then Ivan came forward with his cake, and he uncovered it, and the beautiful towers and turrets and walls and the beautiful decorations of it, oh, it looked magnificent. And the Tsar said, "Now this is a cake fit for the grandest occasion." And so the three princes went home to their wives and reported what had happened with the cakes. Now, a little while later, the Tsar again summoned his three sons, and he said, "Now, your wives, all three of them, have done exactly what I asked them to do. Perhaps not as successfully as they could have, but they have done everything I asked them to. And I am going to have a grand banquet, and I want you all to come." Well, the two older sons, they went home to their wives and told their wives there was to be a grand banquet. And of course, they immediately ordered new dresses and started getting all ready and doing their hair and putting on the makeup and the beautiful dresses and laughing to themselves about what the little frog princess was going to wear to the banquet. Well, Ivan went home, and he was even more depressed than he had ever been. And the little frog looked at him and said, Qua, Ivan, whatever is the matter?" And he said, "Well, my little croaker, Father has said that since all of the brides did what he asked, although not quite as successfully as you did, my love, that we are all summoned to a banquet, and I'm terribly sorry, but I'm just going to be so ashamed to arrive with a frog as my bride. I'm sorry. I don't want to hurt your feelings. I don't know what I'm going to do. And the frog princess looked at him and said, Ivan, go to bed and have a sleep, for the morning brings more wisdom than the evening. And so Ivan did. He went to bed. And the next morning when he woke up, the little frog said to him, Ivan, get yourself dressed in your best clothes, go to the palace, and when you hear a clap of thunder, do not be afraid, do not be ashamed. Just stand up and tell all of the guests not to be frightened, for it is just your little frog bride arriving in her little golden carriage. Well, Ivan was a little ashamed of that, but he said he would go and he would do as his bride asked him to do. So the banquet began, and everyone gathered, and the princes were there with their brides and their beautiful new dresses, and everyone was eager to see what would happen with Prince Ivan. And when Ivan arrived, he didn't have his wife with him. And his brothers and their brides, they teased him mercifully, and they said, oh, Ivan, you should have brought her with you. You could have wrapped her in your handkerchief and carried her in your pocket. Why didn't your little frog bride come with you, Ivan? Well, as they were teasing him, suddenly there was a giant clap of thunder. It was so loud that it shook the entire palace. And the guests were terrified. What was that? And Prince Ivan stood up and he said, oh, my guests, my friends, I am so sorry. It is just my little frog bride arriving in her golden carriage. Do not be alarmed. Well, of course, when the guests all heard frog bride and golden carriage, they went running to the windows to look out. And what do you think they saw? Well, it was a golden carriage, but it was not little. And it was pulled by 6 winged horses with wings, pulled the carriage. And when the carriage stopped and the golden door opened, out stepped the most beautiful woman anyone had ever seen. It was Princess Vasilisa the Wise. And she was wearing a blue dress that sparkled just like all of the stars in the heavens were on it. And on her hair, which she had hanging long down her back, there was a golden crescent moon on her head, like a crown. And she came into the palace, and she took her bewildered Ivan's arm, and he led her up to the head table, and they sat and they ate. Now, as you might imagine, the brides of the elder two princesses were very surprised to see this beautiful woman instead of the little ugly frog they were expecting. And so they decided they were going to watch her very carefully and do everything that she did. And so they noticed that when she drank her wine, she didn't drink all of it. There were just a few drops left, and she shook those drops into the left sleeve of her dress. They wore sleeves that were really big like this, hung down. So she just shook them into the sleeve of her dress. And when they finished eating the roasted swan, instead of leaving the bones on her plate like everyone else did, she took the little tiny bones and she tucked them into the right sleeve of her dress. Well, when the feasting had ended, it was time for the dancing. And the Tsar, who was quite entranced by his youngest son's wife and how very smart she was and how very intelligent and funny, and he asked Vasilisa to dance with him. And she said, of course, Your Majesty, I would be delighted. And she stood up and she went to the dance floor and she started to dance with him. And when she was dancing, other people started to join them on the dance floor, the princes and their wives and noblemen and such. As Vasilisa was dancing, she danced along and she waved her left sleeve, and suddenly at one end of the ballroom there was a lake. Just appeared, a lake. And as she spun round the other direction, she waved her right sleeve, and suddenly there were 7 swans floating, swimming on that lake. Well, not to be outdone, the older 2 brides waved their left arms, and all of the guests got splashed with the wine that they had poured into their sleeves. Well, that was all right. They waved their right arms, and instead of swans, the bones came flying out and went scattering everywhere and hitting people in the face, and one of them hit the Tsar in the eye. And he was not pleased, and so he sent them from the palace and sent them home. Well, while all of this was going on, Prince Ivan was thinking, if this was his bride, but she was shaped like a frog before, then there must be a frog skin somewhere at home. And if he could get rid of that frog skin, then maybe he could keep the beautiful and intelligent and smart and funny Vasilisa the Wise with him all the time. And he would like that very much. And so Ivan left the palace and the party, and he went back to the house, and he found that frog skin that Vasilisa had taken off, and he threw it in the fire, and he watched until it burned up. Well, Vasilisa the Wise came home, and she looked everywhere for frog skin, and she couldn't find it. So she finally asked Ivan, where did it go? And Ivan said, oh, well, I burned it. And she said, Ivan, if only you could have been more patient. Now you have lost me forever. Unless you can find me beyond 3 times 9 kingdoms in the 30th kingdom, in the realm of Old Bones the Immortal. And Vasilisa turned suddenly into a blue dove, and she flew out the window. Well, as you can imagine, Ivan was devastated. He was so sad. And he went to his father and he said, Father, I have to find her. And his father said, you can't, Ivan, I need you here. And so Ivan tried, and he kept trying to get his father to let him to go and find his bride. And he cried, and he wept, and he begged, and he pleaded, but his father needed him at home. And it took a year before his father was able to let him go. And finally, Ivan was able to go, but he didn't even know where to start looking. So he decided to just follow his eyes. And so he started walking. Well, after he had been walking for some time, he walked into a forest. And in the forest, he came across an old man. And the old man said, why, Prince Ivan, what on earth are you doing here? And Ivan told him the whole story. And the old man said, oh, Prince Ivan, if only you had been more patient. You see, when Vasilisa the Wise was born, she was born wiser than her father. And in a jealous rage, he cast a spell so that she would be a frog for 3 years. Her time was almost up, Ivan. But now she is in the hands of old Koshchei, Old Bones the Immortal. No one has ever been able to defeat him. Well, Prince Ivan was very sad to hear all of this, but he still needed to know where he could go to try to find Vasilisa and rescue her, because now he felt like it was all his fault that she was gone, and he knew that it really was. So he asked the old man if he might know where he could find Old Bones the Immortal. The man said, well, I don't, but wait now. I do have something that might be able to help you. And he reached into his pack and he brought out a golden ball. And he said, toss this ball on the ground and follow it. And it might lead you to Old Bones the Immortal. And if it doesn't, it will lead you to someone who can help you. And so Prince Ivan said, thank you very much. And he took the golden ball and he tossed it on the ground and it started to roll. And it kept on rolling. And Prince Ivan just kept on following it. Well, as it was rolling through the woods one day, it stopped. And as Ivan came out into the clearing, he saw that there was a bear standing right there by his golden ball. And so he pulled out his bow and his arrows, and he was about to shoot, when the bear said, no, Prince Ivan, please do not shoot me. I may be able to help you one day. And Ivan said, well, all right then. And the bear walked away, and the ball began to roll again. And Ivan continued to follow it. And after a little while longer, he was going along, and he got to another clearing, and he saw a drake, a male duck, flying through the sky. And he pulled out his bow and arrow, and he was ready to shoot. And the drake said, no, no, Prince Ivan, do not shoot me, for I may be able to help you one day. And then Prince Ivan thought about it for a moment, and he said, all right, I'll let you live. And then he followed the ball some more. And pretty soon a hare jumped up across his path, and he went to shoot it. And the hare too said, no, 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 Prince Ivan, do not shoot me, for I may be able to help you someday. So Prince Ivan said, well, all right. And he continued to follow the golden ball. And after a little while, the golden ball rolled alongside of a lake. And there on the grass, right next to the lake, was a pike, big fish. And it was gasping for air because fish can't breathe outside of the water. And he said, Prince Ivan, please, please, put me back in the lake, please. And Ivan said, well, all right. He felt rather sorry for the poor fish. So he picked him up and he put him back in the lake. And the fish swam away. Well, Prince Ivan, by this time, he was getting a little tired of following the golden ball. And he was hungry. And he wanted a bath. He'd been walking for days, and he was really, really dirty and tired and hungry. But he was continued to follow the golden ball because it kept on rolling. And before too long, it came out in another clearing in the woods. And in this clearing was the oddest little house you have ever seen. You know how houses usually sit on the ground? This one wasn't sitting on the ground. It was sitting on two chicken legs. And it was going around and around and around in circles. Those chicken legs just kept walking around in circles. And the house was just spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. Well, Prince Ivan, being a good Russian lad, he recognized this. This had to be one of the houses of one of the Baba Yagas, one of the witches that lived in Russia. And so he said, little hut, stand as thy mother made thee, with thy back to the woods, and thy face to me. And the hut stopped moving. It turned and it faced him and it stopped. And Ivan went over and he climbed up one of the chicken legs and he went in the door of the hut, and what he found inside was the oldest of the Baba Yagas, the grandmother of all of the witches. And she was sitting on the stove, as Baba Yagas do, and she was leaning on a stick. And when he opened the door and he came in the house, she said, what are you doing here? And he said, is that any way to talk to a prince of Russia? I am tired, I am hungry, and I am dirty. Make me a bath and give me some food, and I will tell you my story. Well, the Baba Yaga was rather delighted by Ivan's spirit and his spunk. And so she did. She made him a bath, and he had a nice warm bath, and he got all clean, and she made him some food, and he sat down at the table and he ate the food, and then he told the Baba Yaga his story. And the Baba Yaga said, ah, yes, I know of Vasilisa the Wise. She is with old Koshchei the Immortal. She is there in his house. But you see, Koshchei, he is immortal because his soul, his life, is at the end of a needle, which is inside of an egg, which is inside of a duck, which is in the belly of a hare. And the hare is inside of a chest, which is at the top of a very old tree, a very tall oak tree, which old Koshchei guards himself. And Ivan said, well, that does sound rather difficult to defeat. Well, I must try anyway, Mother. Could you please tell me how to find it? And so the Baba Yaga told Ivan how to find the tree. And so Ivan went and he found the tree. And sure enough, it was a very big, very tall oak tree. And he could see the chest way up at the top. It was a big chest, but it looked like it was about this big. It was so far up there. And he could see old Koschei, old Bones the Immortal, sitting at the bottom of the tree, guarding the tree. Well, Ivan didn't really know what to do, but he thought maybe possibly if old Koschei would fall asleep, he could shake the tree and maybe the chest would fall out. There weren't any branches down low enough for him to try to climb the tree, so he would have to just shake it and hope that the chest would fall out of the tree. Well, he waited, and sure enough, long about towards later in the afternoon, old Koschei fell asleep. And so Ivan crept up to the tree, and he took a hold of the tree, and he shook the tree. But, well, if you've ever tried to shake an old, tall oak tree, it doesn't work very well. It didn't really shake very much. Well, Ivan shook the tree again. He tried kicking the tree. He tried hitting the tree. He tried trying to knock it over with his shoulder. Nothing worked. And just as he was beginning to feel very defeated, and he sat down on the ground, and he put his head in his hands, and he was trying to think of another way to do it, when suddenly a bear came ambling out of the woods. And the bear said, "Prince Ivan, now I can be of service to you." And he went over to that tree, and he gave the tree a big old smack with his paw. And you know what? The top of the tree fell off, and the chest fell out. And when the chest fell out, it fell down, and it tumbled down, it hit the ground, and it broke open. And out of the chest jumped up a rabbit, and it ran off into the woods. And Prince Ivan was trying to catch it, but he wasn't fast enough. But as soon as the rabbit ran off into the woods, suddenly here came the hare that Prince Ivan had spared. And he had jumped on the rabbit, and he attacked the rabbit, and he tore it to pieces. Well, out of the belly of that rabbit, suddenly there sprang up a duck, and the duck flew up into the air, and Prince Ivan thought, "Oh no, I can't fly. How am I going to catch it now?" And then suddenly, coming out of nowhere, came the drake that Prince Ivan had spared. And it came flying down, and it flew down at that duck so fast and so hard that it scared the duck. And the duck quacked, and out of its mouth fell an egg. And the egg fell down, down, down to the earth and splash right into the middle of a lake. Well, now Prince Ivan didn't know what to do. He could swim, of course, but it was a big lake, and he was going to swim down and search the whole bottom of the lake? That was going to take forever. And just as he was trying to think how he would do it, suddenly he saw something coming toward him. And what do you think it was? That's right. It was the pike that Prince Ivan had saved. And in its mouth, it had the egg. And it came up to the shore, and it deposited the egg on the shore, and Prince Ivan took the egg, and he said, "Thank you, my friends, thank you." And he cracked the egg open, and inside of the egg was a needle. And he took that needle, and he began to bend that needle back and forth, trying to break it. And as he bent it back and forth, old Koschei the Immortal started to sway back and forth and back and forth. And finally, Prince Ivan broke the tip off of the needle, and old Koschei fell down dead because he had just broken his soul out of the needle. So then Prince Ivan, in great joy, he went to old Koschei's black palace, and he went inside, and inside he found Vasilisa the Wise, and she said, "Prince Ivan, my love, you've saved me from old Koschei. You have rescued me. Thank you. Now we can go home." And so they went back to the Baba Yaga's house, and they thanked her for her help. And she loaned them a beautiful horse that ran as fast as the wind. And in just 4 days, they were back in the capital of old Russia. And the Tsar threw a great banquet, a big party to welcome them home. And at the party, he announced that Prince Ivan and Vasilisa the Wise would be the next rulers of Russia after he died. And when they became the Tsar and Tsarina of Russia, they were the wisest Tsar and Tsarina and the most gentle and the most kind that any of the people had ever known. And that is the story of the Frog Princess from Russia. I hope you enjoyed it. We will see you again on Friday at 3 Central Daylight Time here on the Milledgeville Public Library of Illinois Facebook page. We'll have another story for you. I hope you have a good couple days. We'll see you on Friday. Bye.